Welcome to Mr. Giant Reacts and Tig and Tig and Tig. I'm Mr. Giant, and we are going to be doing some Irish history vibe here. And this video is like says the video we're going to be reacting to. I'm just stumbling and bumbling here. If you have one of these Irish last or surnames, your ancestors survived some vibe. You understand? So let's go ahead and YouTube some. What the bumble clot is going on here? I'm not even going to edit this out. I'm going to leave it because it's I'm a human. Let's go ahead and YouTube and simmer and see what the vibe is with this.
If your last name is Irish, there's a good chance your ancestors didn't just live through hardship. They survived something that wiped out entire villages. Between 1845 and 1852, over 1 million people died, and another million fled Ireland forever.
Wow.
Whole surnames vanished from parish records. Entire clans disappeared from the map. But some names made it through. Some families held on, scattered across the world, and passed their name down to you. Today, we're counting down 25 Irish surnames whose bearers survived the worst of it. The Great Famine, British land clearances, and centuries of war and displacement. If your name is on this list, it means something. It means your bloodline outlasted starvation, eviction, and empire. Stick around because number 1 might be sitting in your own family tree right now. Let's begin at number 25 and work our way down. Get ready, because your name could show up sooner than you think. Number 25 is Whelan, coming from the Gaelic O Feolan, meaning little wolf. This family held land along the Waterford and Carlow border for centuries. When the famine tore through the southeast, entire Whelan households vanished from the tenant rolls in a single winter. But the ones who survived scattered fast, boarding coffin ships bound for Boston, New York, and Sydney. Today, Whelans are found on almost every continent, a name that refused to disappear quietly. Local records from the period show entire townlands reduced to a handful of families within a decade. Yet the Whelan name kept resurfacing in ship manifests and census rolls from Sydney to Philadelphia. Number 24 is
Wow, that's crazy, man. That's like decimating a whole population there. Natural disaster, the famine. I don't know what caused that there. And then occupation that would just scatter them. And, you know, at that time, too, we had them going to the Caribbean as indentured servants. You know what I mean? And some of them were even put into prisons and sent over to Australia and places like that, you know, where they had those prison colonies and stuff like that. That is crazy, man. You know, you don't really know much about the Irish until you dip into the history and see all the craziness that, what that they went through. That's just wild.
Nolan. Once the ruling family of parts of County Carlow, the O'Newallans were pushed off their ancestral land during the Cromwellian confiscations 2 centuries before the famine even began. By the 1840s, the Nolans left standing were mostly poor tenant farmers, which made them among the most vulnerable to starvation. Whole townlands of Nolans emptied out. Survivors carried the name across the Atlantic, where it took root and multiplied in America and Canada. Some Nolan families arrived with nothing but a surname and a handful of relatives, yet within 2 generations, they had built entire communities that still gather for reunions today. Number 23 is...
I know some people, I think I knew some people with the last name Nolan on the island. I'm going to have to ask my sister. But I also know people with the last name Nolan here, or whether they marry into the Irish ancestry or not. But where I live here, I know some people with the last name Nolan. Oh, wow. They just scattered everywhere.
Boyle. The O'Bowaghill clan ruled parts of County Donegal for generations, standing shoulder to shoulder with the mighty O'Donnells. When the plantation of Ulster carved up their land and handed it to English and Scottish settlers, the Boyles were reduced to tenants on soil their ancestors once commanded. Donegal was hit brutally during the famine, with entire coastal parishes losing most of their population. The Boyles who lived through it emigrated in huge numbers, carrying their name into the mines and mills of the New World. Number 22 is Healy.
Did he say Boyles? Because that's another name. That's another last name I hear a lot. You know what I mean? I know a few people with the last name Boyles also. So the Irish, they with their disbursement, forced disbursement, they're like everywhere. Wow, that's crazy.
Rooted in West Cork and Kerry, the O'Halaith family were minor chieftains long before English rule arrived. Centuries of rebellion, confiscation, and finally the famine stripped the family down to its bare survivors. Cork lost an enormous share of its population between 1845 and 1852, and the Healys who made it out did so by walking to the ports and never looking back. The name endures today across Irish America almost entirely because those survivors refused to give up, rebuilding first as laborers, then as shopkeepers, and eventually as the doctors and teachers who anchored entire Irish neighborhoods abroad. Number 21.
That's the thing about people who come from stuff like that, and that's throughout history, man. They get to a place and they build and they work and they do what it takes to survive. And it's not just the Irish, you know what I mean? You have people from different parts of the world going to America, going to England, going to Germany, going to wherever. And even if they go to lesser developed places like the Caribbean, they work and they toil. I know in the Caribbean, the Irish, after Barbados sort of collapsed and they all moved to Grenada, they built a whole community, and I talked about that in the last video I did on Ireland. It's called Monk Morris. They just built a whole community and thrived, and the ancestors are still aware of where they're from on the island to this day. To this day, they still have that Irish heritage.
Is Hogan. Tied closely to the powerful O'Brien dynasty of Munster, the O'Hagan family held territory in Tipperary and Clare. Cromwell's campaigns in the 17th century devastated the region. And by the time the famine arrived, most Hogans were tenant farmers with no safety net at all.
Oh, wow.
Tipperary recorded some of the highest eviction rates in the country during the crisis. Yet, the Hogan name pushed through, rebuilding in America, Australia, and back home in a diminished but unbroken form. Number 20 is
That Cromwell, man. I learned about him in school back home, but I didn't know to the extent of what he did. Fitzpatrick, that's a really popular one.
Fitzpatrick. Unlike most names on this list, the Fitzpatricks, or MacGeolla Fedreig in Irish, were a Gaelic clan who adopted a Norman-style name while keeping their native identity from Ossory in modern County Lewis. Lewis was one of the very first regions in Ireland subjected to English plantation, giving this family nearly 300 years of displacement before the famine even started. Somehow, against those odds, the name never went extinct, and Fitzpatricks rebuilt entire communities in exile. Number 19 is Sweeney.
That's
The
an-
Mac-Zibney
I know some
family were
Sweeneys here.
gallant-class warriors, elite mercenary soldiers who fought for Gaelic lords across Donegal and Connaught for hundreds of years. Warriors don't always make old bones, and generations of Sweeneys died in battle long before the famine arrived. Those who survived into the 19th century were mostly poor tenant farmers in one of the hardest-hit counties in the country. Sweeney immigrants became dock workers, soldiers, and laborers across Scotland and America, keeping the old warrior name alive in a new world.
I know some Sweeneys
It's a
here.
strange kind of continuity. A family built on fighting for survival on the battlefield, and then fighting for survival all over again on the docks of a foreign city. Number 18 is Dunn. The O'Doin family were chieftains of Irrigan in County Lowe, and they resisted English plantation longer than almost any other Gaelic family in the region. That resistance came at a cost. By the 1800s, most Duns were small-holding tenant farmers with almost nothing held in reserve when the potato crop failed. Entire Dun households disappeared from parish registers during the famine years. The survivors rebuilt through emigration, and the name remains one of the most recognizable in Ireland today. Number 17 is Flynn. The
That's another
O-flowing
one.
name actually
That's
comes
another
from
one.
several unrelated septs scattered across Connacht, Munster, and Ulster, which turned out to be a strange kind of protection. When famine and eviction wiped out one branch of Flynn's in Roscommon, other Flynn families in Cork or Antrim carried on completely unaffected. That geographic spread is likely the single biggest reason the name never came close to vanishing, even as individual Flynn communities were devastated one after another. In a strange way, being scattered before the famine ever started may have been the very thing that saved the name once it arrived. Number 16 is Fahy. The
Okay, that's
O'Fahy
right.
family farmed small plots around County Galway, right in the heart of Connacht, a
Galway.
province that suffered the worst death and eviction rates of the entire famine. Workhouses in the west filled far beyond capacity, and disease spread through them as fast as starvation spread through the countryside. Fahy families that survived did so by leaving everything behind. The name is far rarer today than it once was,
Yeah.
which makes every living Fahy a direct link to a family that beat extraordinary odds.
I mean, imagine, man, imagine having to just pick up and leave everything because of dire situations. Taking a trip across this big ocean to get to a place where things could possibly be better than where they are. You know what I mean? And the generation who move know when they get to that next place, they're going to struggle. And they're struggling for the next generation, really, because their life is not going to get better when they hit that new place that they're going to. It's not going to automatically get better because they're going to have to go out there and bust their tail just like they did where they come from. It's going to be with less of a struggle. But then when the Irish first came to the New World, they weren't treated very nicely neither. You know what I mean? Yeah, you could still hear Irish jokes and stuff like that.
Number 15 is Brennan. Originally a minor chieftain family from County Kilkenny, the O'Branains lost most of their standing during the Cromwellian settlement of the 1650s.
There's that name again.
By the time the famine struck 2 centuries later, Brennans were largely small tenant farmers with no political protection left at all. Despite that, the name managed to survive in large numbers, rebuilding through emigration to industrial cities like Liverpool, New York, and later across the Irish diaspora in Australia.
A lot of
Number
them went to
14
Australia.
is Kavanagh. This is one of the most remarkable names on the list, descending directly from Diarmait Mac Murchada, the King of Leinster, whose actions in the 12th century changed Irish history forever.
Oh, wow.
For centuries afterward, the English crown watched the Kavanaghs closely, and the family held onto land longer than almost any other Gaelic dynasty. That protection finally ran out. By the famine years, most Kavanaghs were ordinary tenant farmers, and the collapse hit them just as hard as everyone else. Their survival closed out one of the longest continuous Gaelic bloodlines in Irish history, a family that watched empires rise and fall around them for 700 years before
Wow.
finally facing the same hunger
Yeah.
as everyone else.
Yep.
Number 13 is Ward. In Irish, Mac and Paird, meaning son of the bard. This family served as hereditary poets to Gaelic chieftains across Ulster, Connacht, and Donegal for generations. When the old Gaelic order collapsed after the flight of the Earls in 1607, the Wards lost their noble patrons and slowly became ordinary tenant farmers like everyone else. The famine didn't spare them for their history or their poetry. What survived was the name itself, carried by descendants who kept the family's storytelling instinct alive even after the world that created it was gone. Before we move into the top 12,
That name Ward is really popular around here. Well, yeah, not really popular, but it's really prevalent around here. One of my ex-wife's friends that she lives way up in the mountains of Kentucky. That's where she's from. Her last name is Ward. I work with a lady, one of my bosses. Her last name was Ward. You know what I mean? No, like I said, this could be through marriage, but even if it's through marriage, that still brings the ancestry together, and that's vibing there. So wow. Now also have to take into consideration too, some people assume names, they change their names and stuff and all of that, but that's kind of not as pronounced as as the vibe is. But yeah, that's crazy,
I
man.
need a favor from you. If you've heard your own surname already, or you're still waiting to hear it, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications, because this channel is entirely dedicated to uncovering the hidden history hiding inside your own name. Drop a comment below and tell us where in Ireland your family is from, or which name on this list is yours. It genuinely helps other people find these stories, and it helps this channel keep making them. Now, let's get back to the countdown, because the names are about to get a lot bigger. Number 12 is Fitzgerald. Once the most powerful
I know
Norman Irish
Fitzgerald's
dynasty
too.
in the entire country, the Fitzgeralds ruled as Earls of Kildare and Desmond, controlling territory that rivaled the English crown itself. That power made them a target. The Desmond rebellions of the 16th century ended with the family's lands confiscated and their power broken for good. By the 19th century, ordinary Fitzgeralds were tenant farmers like anyone else, and the Munster branch of the family was devastated during the famine. The name survived by sheer scale, spreading further than almost any other on this list, from the west coast of Ireland to the eastern seaboard of America, where Fitzgerald families rebuilt entirely new dynasties out of what little they carried with them.
There was a family named Fitzgerald on the island, and I remember Miss Fitzgerald, when I was a kid. But there's something else that was that caught my eye there. Desmond. Is that an Irish name too? Because my oldest brother's name is Desmond, and there's a lot of people with the name Desmond on the island when I was growing up. A lot of them.
Number 11 is MacLachlan. The MacLachlan family descend from the Sinel Neogain, a dynasty that once produced high kings of Ireland centuries before the famine was ever a possibility. Their power faded after the Norman invasion, and by the time of the Ulster plantation, ordinary MacLachlans were being pushed off land their ancestors had once ruled as kings. Famine-era Ulster hit this family hard, and thousands scattered to Scotland, Canada, and the United States. Few names carry as steep a fall from power to survival as this one. Number 10 is Moore. In Irish, O Morda, this was the ruling family of parts of Loas and Offaly, and they fought England's very first colonization project in Ireland during the 1550s. That early plantation forced generations of Moors into exile long before the rest of the country faced the same fate. By the famine, the family was scattered and largely landless, which paradoxically may have helped some branches survive, since they had already adapted to displacement once before. The name remains one of the most common in both Ireland and its diaspora today. A quiet reminder that sometimes surviving one disaster prepares a family to survive the next one as well. Number
This is so crazy. And it's spelled the same way. My ex-wife's maiden name is Moore. Lots of Moors in this area. I mean, that one is prevalent around here. You know what I mean? Like my ex-wife, she just took back her maiden name, and her last name is Moore, Moore. And it's really popular in Kentucky, I think, more than in West Virginia. There's a lot of Moors. Where my ex-wife is from is a small place called Martin County, Kentucky. And there's a lot of Moors there, like a lot of people with the last name Moors. So I'm taking it, and it's a coal mining place. So I'm taking it that a lot of the Irish people that migrated to that region were miners. Also, there's people on the island with the last name Moore, because I remember when I first met my ex-wife, I was like, hey, I know some people with that last name on the island. I don't know if it was spelled the same though, but I'm assuming with the different places that they go, the spelling might be different, but it's still the same ancestry. Oh, that is crazy. More. I'm gonna have to tell my ex-wife, hey, you have an Irish last name. I don't think she knows
9
that. She thinks she's
is Quinn.
Germanic.
The O'Quinn family were a warrior sept closely tied to the O'Neill dynasty, based primarily in Clare and Tyrone. Like so many Ulster families, they were pushed off their land during the plantation, and by the 19th century, most Quinns were tenant farmers in one of the counties hit hardest by both eviction and starvation. Emigration records show entire Quinn families leaving Clare together during the worst famine years, arriving in America as complete household units determined to start over rather than be broken apart. Number 8 is Murray,
Not a
meaning
popular
roughly
one.
seafarer or descending from O Muriadhe. This family was spread widely across Connaught and
Maury is
Ulster,
popular too.
often in coastal communities that depended on both farming and fishing to survive. When the potato crop failed, these areas lost their primary food source without a reliable backup, and famine deaths along the western coastline were catastrophic. Murrays who survived often did so by using that seafaring background, boarding ships out of Sligo and Galway and never returning. The same skills that once fed their villages became the very skills that got them across an ocean toward something resembling a future. Number 7 is Lynch. One of the famous tribes of Galway, the Lynch family were merchant aristocrats who essentially ran the city of Galway for centuries. They survived the brutal Cromwellian siege of 1652, which devastated the city and its population. 2 centuries later, ordinary rural Lynches faced the famine with none of the protection their merchant relatives once had, and tenant Lynch families suffered heavy losses across Connaught. The wealthier Lynch lines emigrated and preserved the name in the United States, Argentina, and Australia, while the survivors back home rebuilt slowly from almost nothing, piecing a proud family name back together one generation at a time.
In the middle of South America,
Number 6
Argentina.
is Kennedy. Originally O Sinead, a chieftain family closely related to the O'Briens of Tipperary, the Kennedys endured the same Cromwellian confiscations and later famine devastation as their neighbors. What makes this name remarkable is where its survivors ended up. Famine-era Kennedy emigrants left Ireland with nothing, and within a few generations their descendants had built lives across America that eventually reached the highest levels of public life.
Yep.
Few names better illustrate how far a family can travel in just a few generations after starting from total loss. Number 5.
See what I'm saying, man? That's why when people talk about immigration, this immigration, that stuff's been going on forever. You know what I mean? And of course, we know what it means. The Kennedys, John F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, and all of those Kennedys and stuff that became high up. They came over here from the farming and stuff. And like I said, the first group of people struggled, and they build and they work and they build and they work and they build and they work, and boom, up there. All right. Doyle is another popular one.
Doyle, meaning dark stranger, a reference to Viking ancestry. The O'Dubgail family were concentrated heavily in County Wexford. This county was already scarred by brutal violence during the 1798 rebellion, and just a few decades later, the famine arrived on top of the trauma. Wexford Doyles emigrated in massive numbers throughout the 19th century, and the name spread so widely through the Irish diaspora that it remains instantly recognizable as Irish almost anywhere in the English-speaking world today. a name that turned two separate national traumas into one long, unbroken story of moving forward. Number 4 is Gallagher. One of the
Gallagher.
largest clans in all of Ulster, the O'Galshaphair family, controlled significant territory in Donegal before the plantation of Ulster in
Donegal.
1609 stripped it away entirely. Donegal and the wider Connaught region suffered some of the worst famine mortality rates in the country, and Gallagher households were hit as hard as anyone. But the clan was simply enormous to begin with, and that scale meant that even catastrophic losses couldn't erase the name. Gallaghers scattered to nearly every corner of the world and rebuilt everywhere they landed. Number 3 is McCarthy.
Another thing too that I've noticed too, a lot of people have Irish surnames after watching this as their first name, like Gallagher and stuff like that. You know what I mean? A lot of people, I don't know if it's people of Irish descent that want to upkeep certain, Irish distinction. But I've noticed that too. But then again, when you think about it too, a lot of in the Caribbean, a lot of the slaves and stuff, they have Irish surnames using as first names because of the mixing of the people there. You know what I mean? They give them a good Irish name. That's crazy. My grandfather was part Irish, but his last name was Joseph, though. So I don't know, but his first name was Chamberlain.
Once kings of Desmond and among the most
There's
powerful
that Desmond
Gaelic
again.
families in all of Munster, the McCarthys lost almost everything during the Desmond rebellions and the Cromwellian land settlements that followed. By the 19th century, the family had grown so large across Cork and Kerry that they became one of the biggest septs in the entire province, which unfortunately also meant famine losses among McCarthys were staggering in raw numbers. Yet the sheer size of the family going in meant an enormous diaspora came out the other side, and McCarthy remains one of the most common Irish surnames on earth today. Proof that a family can fall from a throne and still end up everywhere that matters 2 centuries later. Number 2 is O'Neill. Few names in Irish history carry more weight than this one. The O'Neills were High Kings of Ireland, the greatest Gaelic dynasty in Ulster, ruling for centuries before the flight of the Earls. In 1607 ended their power for good and opened the door to the Ulster plantation. What followed was 2 centuries of decline, from royalty to tenant farming, ending in a famine that hit Ulster's poorest tenant families without mercy. And still, the name endured, carried by descendants who turned exile into a new kind of legacy across the world. And now,
Check this out. You have Shaquille O'Neal. I mean, of course he doesn't look Irish or nothing like that. I wonder how they got their last name. That would be nice to go back in time to see how they got their last name. Especially in America, I don't know if it worked the same as it did in the Caribbean. They were wrong Irish people, and of course the Irish lived here. How did they end up with that last name? Was it just given to them? Like a lot of the names were just given to the freed slaves in the Caribbean. Okay, you're an O'Neill now, so that they could register. So how did Shaq O'Neill's family end up with the last name O'Neill, which is obviously an Irish last name? That's
number 1.
Murphy, real
Murphy.
popular, real
This is
popular.
the single most common surname in all of Ireland, originally descending from several completely unrelated septs in Wexford, Cork, and Roscommon, rather than one single family. That spread across the whole country is exactly why no famine, no war, and no eviction campaign could ever come close to wiping it out. When one Murphy family disappeared in one county, another carried on completely untouched somewhere else. Famine-era Murphy immigrants left by the tens of thousands, and today the name is so widespread across America, Britain, and Australia that it has become almost a shorthand for Irish identity itself. If
A
your
lot
name
of
is Murphy,
Murphys.
you don't just carry one survival story. You carry dozens of them, all braided together into a single name that simply refused to die. That's all 25 names. If your surname showed up today, take a second to actually
That was really interesting. You know what I mean? And what's interesting about it too is that it's all like I knew 80 to 90% of all the last names there. And not only did I know them, I actually know people with those last names walking around us right now. That is crazy. Shoot, I married somebody with an Irish last name like that. You know what I'm saying? That is crazy. That was really interesting. I really enjoyed that. I hope you guys enjoyed that too. You know what I mean? To just take the last name and relate it to times and stuff. And oh my goodness, man. It's a, every continent and every country to a certain degree have their stories, or like a great majority, not every, but have their stories of having to migrate, be it war, be it famine, be it anything natural disaster related, you know what I mean? And they move to places and they bust their tail, boy. They bust their tail to make it. After all those centuries, those people are still aware of their ancestry. And though they may feel some sort of kinship to it, do they really? Because if they go back, okay, if an Irish person left Ireland around that time, and generations and generations and generations later they're here, if they go back to Ireland, will they feel that kinship? And the reason why I'm pointing that out is, let's say the Africans that came here as slaves, and they were here forever. If you go back to Africa, okay, like for instance, if I go back to Africa, how is that going to feel? Will it feel like I'm going back home? Because, more than likely it's a different language, it's a different culture. Certain aspects of the African culture has bled into the Caribbean and is still prevalent to this day back there. The music, we still do the drums, even when we have our carnival, some of the characters came out of the slave trade, but I wouldn't say it's diluted to a certain degree, but it's going to be different because there was different tribes, and it's like an amalgamation of all the tribes together. Same thing with the Irish, you know what I mean? They went to Australia, Canada, the US. Their descendants, even though they upkeep the Irish lineage, in the way they bring up their kids and stuff like that. You see, like today you're going to hear people say, well, my grandmother used to make this Irish dish, or something like that, from the old country and stuff like that. But do the kids actually feel it? You know what I mean? And how do you instill it in them? Because now they're totally assimilated after all these generations. That's a really cool thing to think of. And if you could equate that, back to the Balkans, because there's a lot of people from the Balkans who are immigrating to other countries and stuff like that. It's a later sort of a thing, but still, And if it's a later sort of a thing, they are more in tune with their heritage because it's so fresh. You know what I'm saying? So fresh in the minds and stuff. Man, I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you did, drop a like on the video, comment down below, tell me what you think. Do you have an Irish last name? Hook me up in the comment section. Let me know what the vibe is and thing. In the meantime, y'all take care of each other. Let's try to bring some peace in this world, okay?